humans, Zbot 4096 here, coming to you from Zogplex with our spoiler-free review of a human rectangular entertainment form, Furiosa, a Mad Max story, or saga, or something to that effect, released in theaters. The obvious context for this film is Mad Max creator-writer-director George Miller's recent hit sequel, 2015's Mad Max Fury Road. This lovely item. Now, technically, a sequel to the series started in 1979 with Miller's original Mad Max, which led to two immediate sequels in that era. Fury Road essentially rebooted the franchise 3 decades later with a new lead actor as Max, and with a story carved into a very specific new set of warlords in the post-apocalyptic wasteland. Oof. And oh yes, this series overall is the quintessential representation of the vehicular combat subgenre of human post-nuclear war survival stories, collectively grouped together as post-apocalyptic films. Humans love this post-apocalyptic stuff, almost to an unhealthy degree, but it also provides a ready structure for both following a storyline and echoing an important warning about nuclear Armageddon and climate change. Both are real risks every civilization faces as it grows beyond the limits of its planetary resources and weighs the responsibility of its growing understanding of science. Now, whether humanity passes this rite of passage is still up in the air, but of course, we, Zbot 4096, are rooting for them. We love humans. They're very cute and squishy. Can be a bit smelly and honestly a bit cruel sometimes, but with some degree of self-awareness. I mean, this post-apocalyptic genre gives them exactly this opportunity to highlight and discuss that smelliness and cruelty that is usually hidden under the deodorizer of baseline civic resources. We like that. And we loved Fury Road. This was a modern action masterpiece. Everything felt real. The characters, the stakes, the insane action scenes, and the story itself. Much of this film was visual storytelling on steroids, but with an emphasis on perspectives and styles that looked like nearly everything was captured in camera. And of course, most films today use expert computer graphics artists to create this impression, and unfortunately also gives studios the ability to claim that no CG was used, which, as YouTube channel The Movie Rabbit Hole has pointed out in their series No CG is really just invisible CGI, is just wrong. But setting this aside for a moment, the less obvious advantage the film enjoyed was a kinetic energy that ran you breathless through everything. We weren't stuck on any lengthy exposition to explain what oddities we were looking at. It was presented as is, as real, no time wasted with having to bring you up to speed. You instead had a lucky ticket to get glimpses of this world and story, and you loved it. Yes! Tom Hardy as Max and Charlize Theron as Furiosa were wonderfully compelling characters, well balanced against each other, like a sniper resting on a tripod, which they quite literally acted out visually in case we didn't catch on. This film stood out both in terms of the Mad Max series and everything else coming out around it in 2015. Many science fiction and action films had become formulaic with overly fantastical action scenes that defied credibility and meaning, and writing that was committee developed to please the 4 quadrants of the human audience. Instead, George Miller incubated this film for decades, relying on visual storyboards to create the story as opposed to a written screenplay, and willed the film to exist. This auteur approach rarely gets the oxygen it needs in today's movie industry. And it's also something that backfires when that auteur gets too much oxygen. And nobody around them is regulating them, and they end up with new problems that the committee approach can usually squash before they mysteriously persevere all the way from script to screen. Now, Mad Max Fury Road was an example of the former case. The auteur struggling against the machine to keep their vision intact and delivered to the screen. Now let's discuss Furiosa. This movie is a prequel to Fury Road. It is intended to lay out the backstory for the character Furiosa, played by Theron in the 2015 film, and now played by Anya Taylor-Joy in this 2024 film. While some of the Fury Road characters also reappear, most of them are portrayed by the same actors, with only Furiosa and Immortan Joe being replaced. The actor who played the latter, Hugh Keys-Byrne, has sadly died, but Theron is very much alive. The decision to not recast her, according to Miller, is twofold. The producing studio, Warner Brothers, went through so many ownership changes that it took 9 years to make this next film. This added to the 20-year swing in the storyline of the age of the character, meant that he'd need to use de-aging CG effects, and given the quality that that technology was at, that would be a distraction to the audience. We dispute that. All the other actors playing recurring characters, like Rictus, People Eater, and Organic Mechanic, were the same actors, and looked fine as their younger selves. So there isn't a good reason to not have Theron back. Anya Taylor-Joy takes over the role, and she's fine, if somewhat limited in range in comparison. Theron was able to convey determination, rage, intelligence, toughness, empathy, reasoning, persuasion, charisma, and growth, while with Joy we get perhaps 60% of that performance. Now, part of that, it's not her fault. It's, of course, the writing. The story is, in the Furiosa film, is long, laborious, predictable, and weirdly unnecessarily brutal. There are several scenes of abject cruelty and torture that are not only not there in Fury Road, but occur so often in Furiosa that whatever superficial meaning they had, which could have been accomplished differently, is now seemingly there for only continued shock value, which of course it no longer has. We do get that Dementus, played by Chris Hemsworth, is a sadist, with potential reasons for his sadism, but unlike Immortan Joe, we just see too much of him talking and hamming it up. The entire film suffers from this effect of there just being too much. While the action scenes in Fury Road all look realistic and build from one to the next, these in Furiosa seem to break that magical balance. In the rush to show a bigger, badder Mad Max world, the result has been impossibly pulled back perspectives, too many vehicles on screen to have been actually shot, of wasteland cities too large to be sets, of cliffhanger scenes too audacious for a stunt team to ever consider, which tips the whole thing back into the bucket of mediocrity that most other of today's science fiction and action films fall into. It's just not plausible, and we don't care. Max himself isn't featured in the film, but that by itself isn't a problem. This film sets out to focus on Furiosa, but we already know the outcome of the film. Given that this is a prequel, the stakes are already preset. Furthermore, the back and forth of who is in charge of what and when has no clear overlap with what we are supposed to understand about Furiosa's allegiances and interests. There is a Mad Max stand-in character as an early decent man role, but we know he is doomed since he's not in the next film. We don't have a clear read on what exactly their relationship is, but that aspect we find is oddly refreshing among the rest of the confusion the film brings along. And that's the last thing a Mad Max movie needs to be. Confusing. It needs to be clear, driving, relentless, not murky, meandering in circles, and giving ample opportunities for bio breaks. We are not human, so we didn't take advantage of that, but we saw other humans doing so. Now, having described this disappointment, the effects and scale of everything is indeed bigger than Fury Road. There's a lot more complex vehicular action in the film. However, it doesn't really land as serving clear purposes in the story. Bizarrely, the film gives up the opportunity to show a large-scale battle and instead offers a portentous voiceover narration to describe what happens. We naturally find this anticlimactic, but also oddly merciful, considering the runtime of this prequel, which has definitionally a foregone conclusion. Now, despite the confusion, we do root for Furiosa. She is a great character, and Anya Taylor-Joy is good in it. And she is flawed and broken, and has to pull herself up. And we are transfixed by her. We witness her. It's weird that she has the resources to create a bionic arm for herself in the wasteland of mostly 1980s technology that barely functions, but the rest of her scrappiness and perseverance does resonate. She does keep us going for the almost 2.5-hour run length of the film. It's only that this Furiosa isn't at the same level as the original one we got. Now, this could be relegated to a matter of opinion. In fact, the human movie rating resource Rotten Tomatoes gives Furiosa a 90% critical rating and a 90% audience rating. As it happens, for all the reasons we've already stated, all these humans are wrong. Adorable, but yes, sadly, wrong. Our assessment of Furiosa is that this film inherits a wonderful character and downgrades her. Downgrades the pitch-perfect balance of action and storytelling she lived in, and gives into the flat trends and bloated conventions of ordinary action movies, earning our low review rating. Yes. And so concludes this human version of our review. If you have feedback on it, disagree with it, please write in your comments so that we can upload the galactic version to Zogplex. You can expect more reviews of theatrical movies, streaming shows, and 4K home video releases as we continue to engage with your human rectangular entertainment. So please watch, like, subscribe, comment, so that we can continue to have the human voice reflected in the cosmos. Until next time, farewell, humans. Ooh, I got so used to doing the Vulcan hand sign, I almost forgot the real thing. Here we go. Farewell, humans.